This is Michael's prayer. Lord, take me where you want me to go. Let me meet who you want me to meet. Tell me what you want me to say, and keep me out of your way.
He went flying around the city, you know, robes flying and all behind him, and always going, and yet always stopped to have the chat.
Not seeking anything for himself, but seeking to share God's love with the person he's talking to.
He's good looking, big, great hair. The priest used to kid him about loving a mirror.
Powerful hands, like a carpenter or construction worker.
I couldn't help but notice he had an earring.
There was very little you could say to Michael that would shock him. He was a monk of the world.
And he had this great, wonderful laugh about him. I call it wild. It was a wild laugh.
I was walking down 31st Street, and he was crossing the street, and he was in his full fire chaplain regalia, you know, the uniform with the hat, and he looked fabulous. I mean, he looked fabulous.
His whole ministry was about love.
He was the perfect Franciscan.
I hope I'm not making him out to be a really holy Joe. He was so human.
He'd be vastly amused at the idea of being a saint.
Michael wasn't the one to judge. He had judged himself enough and then found freedom.
Life and death. So valuable. And you wonder when my last half hour is going to be, or my last hour, what it'll be. Will it be doing something for someone, trying to save a life?
With another edition of City Folk Morning. This one for a Tuesday, September the 11th. Going to be a sunny day with highs in the 80s today. The Carol Burnett Show debuted 34 years ago today. It's Brian De Palma's 61st birthday. It is Election Day. New York City voters going to the polls, a mayoral primary, comptroller up for grabs, public advocate. Julianne will be by with news headlines in just a couple of minutes. It is 8:51, and we are trying to sort out the details of something truly terrible that has happened this morning at the World Trade Center. A very large explosion there, high up.
We were flying into Newark at 10 to 9. And Diana said, does the World Trade Center always pollute like that? And I said, what do you mean? She said, well, there's a burst of smoke just come out of it.
It pours out like slow. It's not like it's fanning flames, like it was just a very, very slow pouring smoke.
I turned around and ran back to the friary. I went in and said, Michael, I just saw the jet, and told him the story. And with that, he said, oh my God, got up, took his habit off, got in his fire clothing. And I remember saying, good luck, and have a good day, and God be with you, and I love you.
Father Judge and some of the other chaplains would normally come to something like that, where the tragedy is the worst, hoping to be of help if anybody was seriously injured. We didn't talk much. You know, I remember saying to him, how you doing? And he's okay, you know, that kind of thing. And then I was busy. And he looked like he was praying. He looked like he was, to me, looked like he was mouthing the prayers. You know, you could see his lips moving. That's what I thought. I saw a concern on his face that I didn't normally see.
You know, my first instinct was, I got to get down there. You know, I got to get down to the tower. So I ran down, and I made it to about Chambers Street. which is about 4 blocks, I believe, from the trade centers, and the first tower collapsed. The sound was so big that you just heard, like, all the people that were down there, like it just took their breath away. Like, the sound was like hit you right in the chest. Like, it like sucked all the air out. I ran and made it to the base of the tower that was still standing. And it was this real eerie light. It was a weird day, you know. There was this beautiful light coming in, and as I was getting near the tower, people were starting to evacuate down the stairs. I noticed that there was a group, like firemen and police and FBI and emergency services carrying this man. So I started making some frames, and the one fireman started yelling at me, you know, stop taking photos, stop taking photos. I kept shooting.
Such a striking photograph. These big men, obviously in anguish, and Michael limp and serene at the same time in their arms. You know, it reminded me a lot of the Pieta.
This is how Michael would have prayed to have had the last day of his life transpire, doing what he loved. This was one of the most horrific moments in American history, and he would have been nowhere else on the face of the earth but with all those folks. Michael wasn't a hero in 9/11. He was doing his job.
He loved the fire department, and they loved him. And he proved it. He could have left the Trade Center. Mayor Giuliani told us that he said to Michael, come with us. And he said, no, I have to stay with my men.
He was one of the gang, you know. He'd come in the firehouse, he'd eat with us, he'd hang out.
He was a living, walking saint.
Father Mike has always done great things for us, always. Baptized our children, he's performed our weddings. He has always gone above and beyond the duty for the firefighters and for the police department.
If anyone symbolized the sacrifices of New Yorkers, of firefighters, police officers, EMTs, paramedics, it was Michael.
He was our spiritual leader, but he was our buddy too.
Frank Bonomo. Yvonne Lucia Bonomo. And my brother, Alex Chacon. We love you and miss you, Alex.
Michael said, sometimes in life when we lose someone we love and we don't know what to do, we should just pray and worship.
Paul Aquaviva.
Thank you, Lord, for their lives, for their love, creativity, for their friendship, their good days and bad, for their happiness, for their anger, for everything they brought into our lives. These are things we should say about each other always. If we did, life wouldn't be half bad.
We love you, Jimmy D. Each day passes brings us another day closer to you.
And my incredible
I hope someday that someone says things nicely about me as I said about them through the years.
Captain Vincent
I love you, so just love each other the best you can.
Karen Sue Juday.
Fire Department Chaplain, Father Michael Judge. And our sister,
Peggy Jeske Alario.
On August 11th, a month before he died, I received a box from Michael, and here are all these books. Prayer books, his lectionary, pamphlets, books of theology, books about spiritual direction for gay people, a couple of novels that I had given him, What made it particularly poignant was the note that he enclosed, which said, "I want you to have these before I go to my isle in heaven." And I thought it was a little unusually serious for Michael, you know. But also, though, he did add that August 11 was a special day because it was around the Feast of St. Clare, the date of the anniversary of his reception into the Franciscan community, and it was a special day for him. And I thought that was lovely too, highlighting the significance of his life as a Franciscan. Michael and I would often talk about Ireland. He had an extraordinary affection for Ireland, the place where his parents were from. But then he would tell me about the number of times that he visited Ireland. There's something very moving and very loving about this man going back to the land of his father's birth to find or to uncover something not just about his father, but I think it's just as much about himself as well.
I welcome you all here today, and especially Father Michael's sister, Dymphna, to the unveiling of this memorial of the late Father Michael Judge, whose family hail from across the road.
It's a sheer honor and a gift for all of us to be here with you. Michael Judge Sr. left this piece of land and left for America, where he met Mary Fallon on the boat, and they became the parents of Michael and Dymphna as a set of twins, as well as with Aaron. Michael and Dymphna and Aaron didn't really know their father because he died when they were children. Through the years, I've known Michael. Two things he would say at times. One was that he was never afraid of death because he'd finally meet his father. And he also said that he had absolutely everything in life, that he was blessed with anything anyone would ever want to have. His only regret in life was that he never called anyone father. He never called anyone dad. And so this is a very special moment.
Let us pause in life's pleasures and count its many tears, for we all sup sorrow with the poor. There's a song that will linger forever in our ears. Oh, hard times come again no more. 'Tis a song, a sigh of the weary. Hard times come again no more. Sunny days you have lingered for my cabin door. Oh, hard times come again no more.
Michael Judge was born on May 11th, 1933. His twin sister Dymphna arrived 2 days later. He was baptized Robert Emmett Judge and grew up on Dean Street in Brooklyn, New York. His father died after a long illness. Michael was 6 years old. He once told a writer, "I've never called anyone Dad. I've always been very much on my own. Although we had nothing, my mother made us feel like we were upper middle class. I was always hustling."
Michael was the quintessential Irishman.
Well, every time you would speak to him, you would either hear the brogue of his parents or a Brooklyn accent. Of course it had an effect on him. He was educated here in the Heights. He's one of her favorite sons. Brooklyn had the Dodgers. You know, Brooklyn had the Brooklyn Dodgers. And they brought everyone together of all persuasions, all colors and races and creeds, religions. You know, they had boarders coming into the house, and every time a boarder left, his mother would hand him a brush and tell him to paint the room. There were a lot of people living in Brooklyn at the time. All the various type of peoples that make up this city, and the different types of structures that were built by immigrants. And it was a very important place in his life. It was his borough.
What Brooklyn gave him was a view of Manhattan. Brooklyn gave him a view of humanity. And anyone who ever came to New York had to see New York through the eyes of Michael, and that was from the Brooklyn Bridge.
I love to walk because it releases all the stuff pent up inside. There is something for me about the Brooklyn Bridge. I must walk it at least once a week. I walk from the Friary downtown and then across the bridge and maybe keep going out to Brighton Beach. I get an ice cream cone there and then come home. I get ideas on the Brooklyn Bridge, even when I'm not looking for one. The stone on the buttresses of the bridge is from West Milford, New Jersey, the place where I was last pastor. I love to look at the Statue of Liberty, the lights of the city, the Verrazano Bridge, the Manhattan Bridge carrying the subway cars. The city is just the most extraordinary place.
It got cool one night, and I said to Michael, "Winter is coming, do you have a jacket?" And he said, "No, I don't have a jacket." And I said, "I want to give you a jacket." So I gave him the jacket, and he loved it. I said, "Well, you keep it. I really want you to wear it in good health." He walked out of my apartment, and I knew he would walk up 7th Avenue back to the house. He got home, and he called me. I said to him, "You got home warm?" He was very evasive. Then it dawned on me. I said, "Michael, you gave that jacket away on the way home, didn't you?" And he said, "Yes, I did." And I said, "What happened?" And he said, "Well, I saw a street person, and I had to put it over him." And I understood what he was saying. I really understood what he was saying, because that's who he was. That was his personality. That was his aura. That was who he was.
He would just say, I was a human being who became a priest so that I could serve. And that was his whole thing, to serve as best as he could.
I remember the lower church and the fountain and a friar. I loved him and his brown robe. I used to follow him around everywhere. I knew then that I wanted to be a friar. I felt a tremendous urge to be a priest and answered yes.
I think he took God as Father and his searching for the lost Father as one and the same search. And it gave a tremendous drive to his spiritual life.
In 1948, Robert Emmett Judge entered St. Joseph's Seraphic Seminary in Callicoon, New York. He was 15 years old, 129 miles from home. After 6 years of seminary and theology study, he was received into the Franciscan order. He took the name Fallon Michael, a fusion of his parents' names. In 1961, he was ordained a priest. Father Michael Judge was 27 years old.
And he was omnipresent in this city. There was a picture one time of a Jesus Christ, a full-length Jesus Christ, the same height as the Empire State Building. And Jesus is looking in to the Empire State Building. And I thought that was Michael in New York, you know? He was huge in that way.
He was tremendous at giving a sermon at a funeral or a meaningful ceremony. He had the ability to walk out into the church in the group and just hit home on real stuff.
A 25-year fire department veteran, his send-off would have made Big John Drennan proud, with his favorite Irish tenor Frank Patterson singing at St. Pat's, and the fire department chaplain carrying a special message for young John, whose face is called a replica of his father's.
You're a fine young man, John. And you stay close to your father and you pray to him every day. I've done that for my own father for 55 years, and he's never left my side once.
He had a way of bringing people together and bringing them into his life in a way that you felt special.
I joked all the time about him, giving absolution to everybody in the room against the orders of the bishop. And that was one of the things that I liked about him so much, actually helping people get back to the church by making it a little bit easier for them to get a sacrament.
This is a blessed place because God's work is being done from this house and in this house. And without you, he can't do what he has to do to save lives in this area. He needs you.
One day he came up to my office and he just got his own fire department car with a siren and the lights. And then he took me for a ride up and down Broadway, running the siren, flashing the lights. It was thoroughly joyous.
He gave so much. We had to give back to him, and that was something that he would take. So it was important for us to, at least if we know if he was in Jersey doing a baptism, that we could eventually get him back here, because sooner or later we were going to need him.
The fire car, bells and whistles, sirens and lights and gadgets, he loved that car. And he took care of it too. And he got the best gas in Brooklyn, and it brought him to the best cup of coffee in Brooklyn. The back of that New York City fire vehicle was full of more goods than any social service center in New York City. He had socks, he had underwear, he had bottled water, he had canned food. That thing was stuffed with all sorts of things for the poor, for the homeless, for guys who were living alone with HIV/AIDS. That's why he loved the car. He couldn't tell you if it was a Ford or Chevy, but he loved that car because it got him around with good things.
I went to a social worker and I got into a hotel downtown, and I stayed there for a while, and then Michael said, I think you're ready to move on. He had pushed some strings and I got a place in the Bronx. And he said, well, go get his stuff packed up. But he said, I got a meeting with the mayor, a very important meeting. And he said, I'm not gonna make it in time, but I'll take it. I made a vow and make sure I see it through this. It was a fire department call that he came in, and he had put the siren on because he wanted us to make it to the Bronx on time because he had an appointment with Giuliani. He helped me unload it, and he gave me a couple of dollars, say I'll see you in the morning. He said, well, anyway, I'm gonna be late for a good cause. I wanna make sure you get set up and situated right.
He was so scrupulous with money that he wouldn't have his own checking account. So he used mine. There was $8,000, $10,000, $12,000 coming into my account, but everything coming in was going out. And within a month, I was out of checks. And I went to him and said, you have to get your own checking account. And that was verboten. There was no way he was going to open a checking account. And I kept saying, Michael, if the IRS ever looked at this little checking account, they were going to think we're drug dealers or something. But the checks were going to hospice care, Meals on Wheels, an elderly woman needing a television set, a check for $300, to someone with AIDS who needed their rent paid, someone having an operation, to the Irish Parade in Queens. They literally left a paper trail of his benevolence and his kindness and the diversity of his interests. He was really graced with a special gift of being able to connect with the God he saw in everyone he met.
I'll tell you one particular time I was in I was in Penn Station, and you know, you could drink beers. You know, they don't put no bag on it. You could just have a beer. You know, this was basically like 1 o'clock at night. You know, I was sitting there drinking. I mean, it's crowded, full of people. Everybody got beers. You know, I got my music. I think I was dancing a little. Then all of a sudden, this man in a robe coming towards me. I got the beer like this. I said, oh my, it's Father Michael. He said, Eddie. I said, oh, you know, I'm scared, I'm shaking. Everybody's looking at me because they like, where does this pastor know this guy from? And you know, he embracing me like he always do. He's gonna embrace you, I don't care. He embraced you. And he said, Eddie, I'm gonna take you to AA, okay? I said, okay. And when he left, I got the hell out of there.
And he was the king of the city. He was committed to prayer, to people, to AA, and to his walks. And he soaked up energy from the sidewalks, from the streets. He just loved the energy of the city. And some of the great moments that I remember are standing in front of the New York Public Library. They have the 2 lions right at the front of the library, patience and fortitude. And there he would stand and pontificate and say, here we have patience and fortitude. He said, I need more of this. And he did for the life he was living and the work he was doing. He'd say, patience and fortitude. Here they are, right in the heart of the city. At Christmas, later in the evening when things would die down and we could go up, and he liked to walk up Fifth Avenue and then across to Madison and look at the windows and then take in the tree. And then we would take walks up to St. Patrick's, and there he had his reflections upon what the church could be. And as he always said, the easiest job in the world would be to be a cardinal in New York. The opportunity to bring healing, to reconcile, to listen, to mend walls, to bring peoples together. He probably would have been really good at it. But as he knew, he marched to a different drummer, and thank God, because that made him the people's, the common man and woman's priest.
His church, I used to always go there and help out on 31st Street. He have a church over there to give out clothes to the homeless and food and stuff. I used to always go there. And I was like the head security over there, you know, make sure nobody act up, stuff like that. And over a few years I was with Pat, we basically got to know each other. You know, we was very close because him and Patrick Kowalski was very close.
He'd come early in the morning, and he would come and ask me, how many coats do you need this winter? And I'd give him a number, and we'd go down to Canal Street, where he knew several of the owners personally, owners of these clothing stores. And we'd go in, and he would say, I want the cheapest price you're going to give me. These are going to homeless people, and I'm a priest, and I don't have money. And he would really play it up.
But that robe on it, it was basically like Jesus Christ coming at you or something, you know.
He would wheel and deal with these store owners.
We get at least about, maybe about 10 boxes, like 40 coats in each box.
They would bicker back and forth, but he'd always win.
All 3 of us is in the front of the car, all the boxes in the back seat, the back, all of us are squeezed, maybe a box squeezed in right in between. And until the day, I don't even know if he paid for it, to tell you the truth.
It was every year. And coats, because coats are a really big thing for people, especially when you're an addict or a derelict or someone who has relapsed or living in the Bowery, and often walking around with blanket.
We would give the coats to the homeless people and the HIV people. That's where the coats would go to. I felt good doing that. You know, for a person like me, I used to be a street person. You could have seen me in a box sleeping till I met Patrick. Then Father Michael helped me. Between Patrick and Father Michael, that changed me. So I never forget that. Never forget that. Them two basically changed my life around.
July 18th, 1996, TWA, Flight 800 had crashed off coast of Long Island. My sister Paula and nephew Jay were on the flight.
Paula was very beautiful, and she had a great personality. She was a flight attendant for TWA. And she was taking Jay for his 9th birthday to Paris.
They put us all up in this hotel, about 3 days of chaos and then another almost month of waiting and hoping. And Michael was there every day, always had that smile, always had that twinkle in his eye, under the gravest of circumstances.
I knew he was a Franciscan with the sandals and the brown robe. And he had a big hand, because when he shook my hand, I just thought mine was so tiny, like a baby's. He had Mass every night.
He had Mass every night.
7 o'clock.
And it wasn't just the Catholics who would come.
It's everybody.
It was everybody. Muslims, Jews. It was amazing. It was amazing. He'd have it inside, he'd have it outside at that little
Right,
little
the
garden.
makeshift altar.
It was just so comforting to listen to the man talk.
You have given so many around the world courage and strength by your perseverance and your love. I have been a recipient, a large recipient of your goodness, your faith, and for your love. My life, like yours, was changed. It'll never be the same. But I'm grateful for the change, and I thank you for the gift.
He was such an interesting character, you know. He was a recovering alcoholic, and you know, he had told me, you know, the story how, you know, he was on a bender once. You know, he changed his name from Emmett to Michael when it happened, and you know, he woke up one morning and he had a tattoo of a shamrock in a place that, you know, we probably can't talk about. But anyway, that's the kind of guy he was.
I don't think that I could have survived this long without him. I really did love this man.
A week after Flight 800 went down, there was a ceremony at Smith Point, and Father Judge was asked to say a prayer. And he got up in front of hundreds of family members and hundreds of cameras, and he said the following: God is present, loving, smiling, having received our loved ones.
They are in his presence, illumined by his smile and warmed by his love. His kingdom is enriched this day, so enriched by so many beautiful souls. So much beauty. Our world is so empty without them. Our hearts are broken, our sadness immense, our tears so abundant. We live our sorrow together. We need you. Please come and touch us. Fill us with courage. Calm our discomfort. Give us signs of your presence. We ask you, we beg you, come.
He was with us every day, from the time of the crash till the time we buried my sister and nephew. He brought me a lot of faith and a lot of hope. To me, that was very inspiring, you know. There's hope out there. He was a messenger.
In a speech he gave during one of his visits to Northern Ireland, Michael said, "You have no idea of the thousands of prayers that every Saturday evening and Sunday morning go up to God from the churches of North America for peace and unity in Northern Ireland. You hear it over and over again. For peace and unity in Northern Ireland, let us pray to the Lord." This little territory is known the world over. So, with all those prayers, and a loving, kind God who wants us to be at peace with each other, there has to be a solution coming.
Father Michael Judge, a Franciscan friar, first visited the city in the summer of 1998 with Stephen MacDonald, a disabled New York policeman. Father Judge pushed his wheelchair on a journey of reconciliation around Belfast.
He thought that he could come here, listen to people as he does, and then share the story of his own reconciliation, hoping that it would touch hearts and it would maybe help some people. One person, if only one person, to make a change in their life.
We had heard more about Stephen MacDonald, that he was a policeman who had been shot in New York, and we were sort of saying, well, it's very nice of these people to come, but how relevant is it to us in Northern Ireland? I mean, we've gone through the troubles.
Yeah.
We know what it's like for people to be disabled and maimed through shootings and bombings and everything else. But it was Michael's slant on the situation.
It told us the story of reconciliation where Stephen actually met with the person that had shot him. You know, and that was powerful.
In my country, there's plenty of violence, and I've shared that story of forgiveness, peace, and happiness, and it's helped many people, young and old. So I came here to Ireland. I'm a citizen of the Republic, and I thought that I could share that story with people, north and south, and hopefully it will help someone.
It was a risky venture that could have ended up in trouble.
We're all Irish, and we're all fighting for the same thing, for justice and peace. We want the brutality to stop, and that's the message Michael carried. Whenever there was an injustice, he was the first one on the line to say, you're not going to do it anymore. It's not permitted. It's a different world. He was carrying a message of love.
People want to rule over other people and have God on their side. And if you're not on their side, then God's not on your side, and all these sides. When you think about it, it is a tremendous waste of time and energy, and all it does is cause wars. And then people get killed, and families get divided, and everything goes wrong.
Just before the 7:30 Saturday evening vigil mass, Michael turned up in the church sacristy and said they'll come to pray for peace.
He mixed with all shades of opinion within Northern Ireland. All political parties, he mixed with everybody.
He said the prayer for peace, Lord, make me an instrument of your peace, which is a Franciscan tradition.
He did come across as a genuinely holy man.
People were delighted to have somebody go to all that trouble to show solidarity with them, and coming all the way from New York and going through the rigors of a walk and an escorted walk through difficult situations.
Well, when Father Michael came, it would have been really at the height of the whole situation. So it would have been pretty tense, and you'd have had the media circus all starting to arrive and the army starting to arrive and putting up barricades because either the march was going to get down the road or it wasn't. You could feel it's kind of hyping up. He was talking about trying to forget about the past and move on. You know, that you could kind of have a normal conversation with somebody where they weren't going, oh God, I wonder where the army is now, I wonder where the police is, I wonder is there something going on down the road, what's that helicopter doing out? He just seemed to disassociate from all of that. He just was there to do what he was doing, and you know, he was on a mission. He went up to the other community and met. He was setting himself up, not that everyone would abuse him, but there was a good chance that he would run into a barrage of abuse. But it didn't deter him, he still went on ahead.
There will always be the people who want to destroy what God builds up through good people, but God will overcome. And God, someday, I don't know how he's going to do it, but he's going to make the headlines rather than the devil. He will in the end. So don't give up. We pray together. We hold hands together. We believe together. We love together. We're saved together. And God reigns.
One of the most significant conversations I had with him was when I was going through an extremely bad time. And everything had gone wrong in my life. And my marriage was very rocky. My wife Diane and I were separated for a while. I was broke, literally broke. I was on welfare, getting $270 a month and food stamps, and I had to go and sign up for that at the age of 55, I guess I was, and I was humiliated. I didn't know the difference between having humility and humiliation, and Michael Judge did. But talking to him one day about this horrible, where I had fallen to, I've been on the peak of great success, having had saloons, being on television, in films, talk show host and everything else. And here I am on my arse. And no hope, I thought. And he said to me, and I'll never forget this, he said, "My God," he said, and who also you can have if you want, is all powerful. But my God has, despite his power and his all-knowing and his divinity and all that, has not yet made tomorrow. So for you to worry about the future is not too good an idea, because God, not having made tomorrow, does not know what's going to happen. God does not know what's going to happen. He has not yet made the future. So who the fuck do you think you are? He said.
But God made everything good. And he created man and woman to his image and likeness, and he made it good. And then Jesus comes along, and he tells us, after everything has happened, good, bad, and indifferent, he says, don't worry about anything, what we're going to eat, and what we're going to wear, and what we're going to do. Don't worry about it. Stay in today, and your Heavenly Father will take care of you, and everything will be given to you. Stay in today. Don't get into tomorrow. All about God in our lives. It's just absolutely fantastic. It's fantastic how I can sometimes begin a day and go through a day and hopefully say a prayer here and there, but not realize that everything that happens, every single thing that happens, is somehow within the divine plan.
Michael told a reporter, "The life I have is not what I planned on, but I had no idea of what life I'd have. You just don't know, so you just go and take one day at a time. I live in today as best I can for the glory of God and his people."
When Michael was younger, he was in a monastery. It was winter, and Michael was looking down the street, and there was a bad snowstorm. And Michael said, I was looking out the window and just standing there in my pajamas. And his roommate, who he liked a lot, got up and came over to the window and stood there. They were both meditating, looking out the window, feeling so close to each other. And Michael said, I could feel the heat from his nose. I could hear him breathing. And he said, I don't think he was an inch away from my body. And we stood there for 2 hours, just standing and staring. Finally, the other monk went to bed and Michael went to bed. Nothing happened. the next morning, Michael went down to breakfast, and they noticed that the other monk that he had shared the room with wasn't there. So they all started looking for this guy, and somebody said, Michael, maybe he went back to the room and isn't well. When Michael went back to the room, the man's habit and rosary beads and rope was laying on the bed, on Michael's bed. And the man had left the church.
One part of Michael's personhood is his sexuality. And it was something he wasn't afraid to talk about because it humanized him. It was out of that need and that want that we all have to connect, to touch, to feel. That was what empowered him, in good part, to be such an effective minister.
He was proud, I think, of the way he looked. I used to kid him a lot when I'd see him with women. I used to say, if they only knew. He liked wearing a uniform, too. He looked great in our uniform, just a white collar. He fit right in. I talked to him about being gay a lot. I never had the sense that he was in any way ashamed of being gay. It was definitely something that he didn't want people to know about in the fire department. And I think that he felt it would compromise his ability to help so many of them if that became something that he had to deal with every day. I think that he felt strongly about what good men they were, and they bonded with him immediately.
People loved him because they clearly saw that he went where the love took him, you know, and sometimes that was a painful place.
It was very important for us to learn that God wanted us as priests. If we had been honest and told everyone we were gay, they would have refused to ordain us. So we were hypocrites.
He walked a particular road and prayed for the strength to be able to walk it.
He wanted to be a minister to the whole world. In his day, in the 1980s, you could not publicly announce yourself as gay and remain an acceptable minister in the straight world. That was not possible. So he had to make a choice to remain publicly closeted and only to come out of the closet to those who would understand and accept him in his gayness.
You know, it was a tricky, a difficult line he walked. He wanted not to scandalize, not to harm the firefighters. He wanted to be their chaplain. He wanted to be available to them, and he didn't want to scandalize in the sense that some might not be able to cope if they knew he were gay, you know. But he didn't want that to interfere with his availability, his service, his love, his sharing the faith with them. And so that was his way of safeguarding them. I'd say as maybe much more so than safeguarding himself.
Just when I thought I had Michael Judge sorted out, all of a sudden Michael would catch me by surprise. I will never forget the day I got the call from him inviting me to a dinner dance that was being organized by the Emerald Society of the New York City Fire Department. In fact, he told me on the phone that he was being honored at this event as Irishman of the Year. Michael Judge was bringing all of the people in his life together, his family, the pipers, the fire department. There was room for us all in Michael Judge's heart. And that he would want Tom and I there meant so much to both of us. But I remember then when it came time for dancing and Michael coming down, and to be very honest with you, as a gay man, I have to admit that I was sort of thinking we're actually going to have to sit this through and let the others get up and dance together. And I remember Michael coming down and saying, you know, make sure you get up and dance.
It was a fundraiser for the Irish. And there was a waiter going around with some drink on a tray. And they asked me if I wanted to have a drink, and I said I didn't drink. And they asked Michael if he wanted to have a drink, and he declined. And I went up to him later on, and he had his habit on, his Franciscan habit on. And I said, how come you don't drink? And he said, oh, I have a terrible allergy to it. And I said, are you a friend of Bill's? Bill Wilson, the founding member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And he said he was. And we shook hands, and he gave me this wonderful hug.
And I don't think anybody knew Michael was an alcoholic. And it was during the Siena years, when he was working in the campus, that's when he entered AA and found his sobriety. And he would later share with me, right under our nose in the dormitory, he was mixing drinks in the morning for breakfast, and he said he remembered looking at a green liqueur in his bathroom. He had 4 or 5 liqueurs, and he was mixing all sorts of drinks, and he said, you know, this is out of control.
St. Patrick's Day, 1991. I was off to my meeting just to get through another day sober. And next, the door opens, and in walks Michael Judge. And I remember being amazed at that. He's just gone from marching with Governor Cuomo, all his friends, the fire department. They're all off in various places celebrating. And here he is taking care of himself and taking care of his soul and his spirit, you know, as a recovering alcoholic, as a sober Irishman.
He knew what it was to not be your best self. He knew what it was to let people down. He knew what it was to be irresponsible. And he also knew what it was to be saved.
You know, you'll often hear people saying, you're as sick as your secrets. All of a sudden, the weight of having to hide, the weight of having to live a double life or be duplicitous, all of a sudden that's lifted. And there's the relief that you can finally be born and really be yourself, maybe for the first time.
Well, he'd call on the phone, you know, and he'd tell you about a meeting that he's been at earlier in the evening, and about this wonderful person who shared his life or her life. And he'd just say, isn't sobriety grand? You know, it was a whole new life for him. You know, he was 23 years sober when we buried him.
Until 1984, Father Michael was a much-beloved minister to 3 New Jersey parishes. A newspaper article about his ministry called him the listening priest and quoted Father Michael saying, "As long as I can remember, I wanted to be a priest. I love being a priest." The hardest lesson I've had to learn in 13 years as a priest is to let people be themselves. Before Vatican II, we were always trying to manage people's lives. Do this, don't do that, go to Mass, don't eat meat on Friday. I was brought up in the old school, and I have to remind myself, Mike, let people be. In the old days, people isolated us on a pedestal. Today, there's a continual challenge for us to do many things, to really be ministers, to bring the sacraments to our people, to counsel, not to give answers, but to counsel. My sin is not having enough hours in the day to follow through with people. I talk to so many, the young kids getting married, the middle-aged with family and marriage problems, the elderly. Sometimes we have 3 funerals a week, and that means consoling people who we've known for a long time. We're a part of their lives, and we can't be detached at moments of death. At the wakes, the family knows us better than they know the relatives. You're important, and you know it, but it wears you down.
He got the okay to come to Canterbury to study there. I just think he enjoyed the pace of life. It was largely a good year for praying more, learning more, more time for reflection. He needed a bit of oomph. He was very energetic, he was vibrant, he was excited. And at the same time, he was quite reflective. I saw him very, very often slipping off to the chapel. You know, going off and having a wee chat. And he seemed to come back recharged, because when it came to coffee breaks and, you know, mixing with us, he seemed to have an energy or a power. And I know the alcoholics call this the higher power. One night he suggested that we would come to an open meeting with him. And, we were all excited about this. What we observed that night was they just converged on him like flies to honey. We just thought the whole sharing and daring to share was absolutely wonderful. You could actually feel the healing manifest in him and in ourselves. Mike loved the hell out of every one of us, because lots of us were experiencing sort of hell. Yeah. Community life isn't easy at times. I think when you're in a tight situation, you just go ahead and peel off. It was around our first Halloween break we decided to have a party based on Spoonerism. Give you the illustration. All of us are familiar with Cinderella and the Prince. The Spoonerism is when you change the word by mistake, supposedly, and call that Prinderella and the Sins. And, the fairy godmother would be Gary Fodmother, and the ugly sisters would be the Sugliesters. I remember I was the Sins. Brian was Prinderella. Mike was the Gary Fodmother. And there were 3 very, very Sugliesters. Mike's eyelashes are 2 inches long, and whatever he did with his lips, they seemed to be stuck together for the duration. He was quite comfortable out of the habit. You know, he had his denims and his T-shirts and everything, and looked very groovy, as they say. I mean, he really cut a dash. Do you know, how he expressed his sexuality, it wouldn't colour my thinking of him any less. I think he just was a very good man, and he loved so many. And for me, that's what we're all called to. I know that seems a bit preachy, but that's what I feel.
I don't know what's next for me. I pray all the time for guidance on how to make decisions. I get down on my knees and pray, Lord, help me, show me, take me, mold me, fashion me, show me what you want. I watch and I listen, and it will come. The phone will ring, or someone will just ask for something. It just happens like it has for years.
It was the early 80s, and we met for dinner at the Sheridan Square Diner in New York. And Michael asked me what I did besides travel. And I told him that I was working with the gay men's health crisis. And Michael wanted me to explain that to him, so I said to him that this issue of GRID, gay-related immune deficiency, was really becoming a problem, and that each one of us would take 3 or 4 or 5 patients. They were really shut-ins. They couldn't go out, and they needed counseling and just another person in their lives, because so many people abandoned them. People of their good friends were worried that they were going to catch whatever it was that they had.
I had many, many friends who were hospice volunteers who basically dropped out during the AIDS epidemic because, as they would say to me, I really feel bad for these guys. I don't have anything against them, but I have a husband and children, and my husband would kill me if anybody got sick. So that was the general sense of non-knowing. And I found it carried over even to hospital personnel, medical professionals. It broke my heart to be in a room with a patient who was suffering intensely, was in a darkened room because of sensitivity to the light, in total isolation, red flags all over his door, almost as if he was some kind of a disease himself. And a door would open without any knocking, and a tray would be pushed in on a wheeling table by someone from dietary who was wearing double robes and double layers of gloves. It was just such a fear. It created such a sense of indignity and non-caring.
And I told Michael my patient is very sick and that they had removed an eye and that they had removed his testicles. And they, in those days, I think maybe they thought they could cut it off or cure it or remove it like a cancer. But anyway, I said to Michael, my patient would really like to talk to a gay priest. And Michael sort of blanched. He was so shocked. He said that's the moment that it clicked. That he drove back to New Jersey and he suddenly realized what God wanted him to do. When Michael went home that night, he noticed people in New York City. He noticed that he had to be in the Mecca. He felt very isolated. He felt that he could do so much more for people. That was a turning point for him. The next day in the morning, Michael came over in his habit, and he had the ropes and the full sandals and the whole outfit. He walked into the hospital, and the strangest thing happened because Michael didn't put on a mask. And here was this poor guy who had body parts removed, and Michael went in and kissed him on the lips.
There was a very, very deep identification because these were the brothers that were dying of this disease, that was preying on us. And in fact, what was happening to him and to everybody else at that moment in history in 1987, 88, all the way up through 93, was that your phone book was being wiped out. You just had crosses in your phone book of people that were dead.
I think it was before a month had gone by, Michael said to me, I talked to my superiors and I want to come back to New York City. I want to be with the poor. I want to be with the homeless. I want to be with the people sick with AIDS. And he really got into it. He just came over and he couldn't see enough. He became the priest walking through the ward at St. Vincent's Hospital. He became very involved with the gay men's health crisis. He was very involved at fundraisers. His presence was just seen.
He would go to the hospitals and look up people dying of AIDS and go into their room, and very frequently he would be rejected because they would see a church figure and see the church as their enemy, and legitimately so at the time, what the hierarchy were saying and doing. And this really hurt him. He wanted to bring the messages of God love, and they refused to speak to him. It wouldn't have anything to do with him. And it really pained him terribly. And so he told me he prayed very hard, asking God to tell him how to get around that hostility and that rejection and be able to perform his task. And he told me one day that he found the answer. He would take holy oil, sacred chrism, into the hospital room, and before he talked to the person, he would roll back the blankets and massage his feet. Even if they had Kaposi sarcoma and blemishes, he would spend a good time massaging their feet and then talk to them. And almost every time he did that, the hostility would fall away, and he was able to enter into a spiritual conversation.
I don't plan anything. I come into their presence and silently pray. Lord, be with us. Let your will be done in our lives. Show us, have mercy on us. You see, I'm only the instrument. It's not me, it's the Lord. It's His world. I respond with empathy and ask how I can help them.
It was Ron who answered the phone at 1 a.m, and as soon as he heard it was I, he said, Mia, I don't know how it happened, but I've got AIDS. And I nearly collapsed myself. It was just like a knife going through my heart. And Ron kept saying, Mia, how soon can you come down? Lan needs you.
Ron loved to be photographed. and he loved us to be photographed together. And really, I think one of the reasons why that he was ready to die was because he had the photo. And he told me this is the photo because he didn't want an open casket. Yeah.
There came a point where Ron did call me and start talking about whether there was any possibility of his receiving the last rites. And I assured him, of course there is. And he said, but his experience, as that of so many others, was that don't even bother making confession if you're not going to change your lifestyle. So with all his illness, he still had the feist to say, I am not changing who I am. I can't change who I am. And Larry was the one who said, well, what about this Father Michael?
It was sort of funny. Ron forgot the Our Father or something, and Father Michael made a joke about it or tried to help him, and it was cute.
He then explained the sacrament of anointing of the sick and said, I will be making the sign of the cross with a blessed oil on each of your senses. And I'd like you to join me in thanking God for the gift of those senses, for everything you've seen, everything you've heard, for the ability to speak, to express your love and your joy and your pain, and for everything you've touched and felt, and for all the places your feet have been able to take you to. And if, as I give you those blessings, you want to join me in saying, and also forgive me for any failure to accept this gift, then you just say, please forgive me.
Ron was in a wheelchair and very frail and, what you call wasted.
After anointing Ron, Michael went on with some of the prayers of the Mass and got to the point of communion and gave communion to each of us, then put the chalice down on the table and bent over and picked Ron up in his arms and just held him to himself and rocked and kissed him on the head. I will never forget it, because that man had said to me so many times, Mary, does God hate me? And I'd always say, sweetheart, God could not hate you. He cherishes you. He made you who you are, and he loves who you have become. And here was Michael, standing in for God, holding him in his arms and crooning to him.
He didn't have to do that. But I think he really had love for people and really understood what love was.
Michael celebrated the funeral Mass and began by facing the family, Ron's parents, who, after all, had struggled for a lifetime with a very unusual son and who had a lot of cultural reasons to feel uncomfortable about who Ron was. And Father Michael stood there and looked right down at them with the most tender and caring expressions and mentioned them by name and said, how proud you must be. And all I could think of was, this is the first priest I've ever heard tell the parents of a gay boy that you should be proud of him. The most I'd ever heard anyone do was try to tell them how to cope and not blame themselves. This was so totally different. And Michael went on to say what a great gift Ron was to the family. And that gift was so magnified by his love for Larry. And that their whole family would be forever blessed by the love that Larry and Ron had shared.
I don't think any of us knew at that time, least of all Michael, of the power that he was bringing to this, the spirituality that he was bringing to a community that really needed it.
For sure, I marched to a different drummer. I just don't belong to the church of so many of these priests. They are good men to the core, but in a different church than myself. But that's okay.
He had that direct line to God, and therefore the church couldn't get in his way.
For 15 years, gay and lesbian Catholics have been able to attend a special Sunday evening Mass, sponsored by an organization of Catholic homosexuals known as Dignity.
Dignity was part of a flourishing movement of renewal that was taking place within the Catholic Church. Michael, of course, like many others, sought out this community and felt very much at home and made important friendships there. So as well as being an important minister to this community, it also became, I would say, a family for him.
Our Father, who art in heaven.
Of course, all that changed in October 1986. The Vatican issued a letter on the pastoral care of homosexuals in the church. This letter was issued at the height of the AIDS crisis. And here was this word coming from the Vatican, from the heart of our church, from our leadership. It actually came from the CDF, which is the Congregation for the Doctrine and the Faith, headed at that time by Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, now Pope Benedict XVI. Our church was sending a message which for all of us was a message of rejection, of hostility, at a time, in fact, when our community needed support, comfort, and reassurance.
Homosexual Catholics in New York protesting the eviction of their organization Dignity from St. Francis Xavier Church by the New York Archdiocese.
I will never forget that night in March 1987 when we had our final liturgy at St. Francis Xavier. This candlelight procession of literally a people in exile. Many of the priests also received word from the Chancery that they could no longer support our community. And each priest had to decide what they would do.
Michael couldn't be contained by structures, and yet he loved structure. He loved the church, but he had a different vision of the church. Remember, he was a Franciscan. He had a vision of the church which is about bringing the Word of God to people.
The next memory I have of Michael is Christmas Eve, when we were meeting in the Lesbian and Gay Community Center. For many of us, and for many in the community at the time, I remember, that was actually very lonely. As Catholics, somehow, they missed the ambience of the church. Maybe the smells and bells, they just missed it. They missed the feel of the sacred space. We were sitting around wondering, would he arrive? But he did. He actually lifted out of his bag Jesus in the manger, this little statue, and used it as part of his homily that night. I think the beautiful thing was we were not abandoned, that Michael was there with us as part of our community.
Sunday morning, I had the 7 o'clock Mass followed by a good shift of confessions. The whole rest of the day was phone calls, about 35 of them, to people telling them where I was going. It was amazing, all of the intentions they gave me to take with me, all of the pain and the fears, and the faith to know that Our Lady will hear all the prayers. I will light a candle and remember them in my masses at the shrine.
I think he had a tremendous love for Mary. He loved to travel to all the shrines honoring Mary. He would go frequently with groups of pilgrims, especially sick or people who were looking for a miracle to be healed. And he had profound belief in Mary's presence in this world, reaching out and healing.
You are my God of surprises, you really are. You gave us sun today, at least most of the day, and it was supposed to have been very heavy rain. It worked out fine.
If Jesus were around, where would he go? He would go to Lourdes and be a healing presence there and bring people a message of hope and joy and belief in God and assurance about the hereafter. And so Michael wanted to be an imitator of Christ, and he thought the place to be would be Lourdes.
Now I understand the words of St. Francis de Sales. He will shield you from suffering, or he will give you unfailing strength to bear it. Be at peace then, and put aside all anxious thoughts and imaginings. The Mass was beautiful. I got a spot to stand at right under the feet of Mary so I could keep looking up at her and tell her of all my New York people and their needs, and I know she heard me. Like all the other people in the world, Mary knows that New Yorkers are a very special people.
Up days, down days, sad days, happy days, but never a boring day on this job. You do what God has called you to do. You show up, you put one foot in front of another, you get on the rig, and you go out, you do the job, which is a mystery and a surprise. You have no idea when you get on that rig, no matter how big the call, no matter how small, you have no idea what God's calling you to. But He needs you. He needs me. He needs all of us. Keep going. Keep supporting each other. Be kind to each other. Love each other. Work together. You love the job. We all do. What a blessing that is. A difficult, difficult job, and God calls you to it, and then He gives you a love for it, so that a difficult job will be well done.
There was a person laying on the corner. He was laying there, and he had his jacket over his head. I see Lieutenant, he was telling me, can somebody go get this man a priest? Can somebody get this man a priest? It's the fire department chaplain. I try to think of myself as a good Catholic, so I knew where it was the closest Catholic church. I ran up and went around the corner. There was a lady there, and she was ripping up linen. So I asked her, I said, is there a priest here? She goes, they're not here, there's nobody here. They all went to help. She told me, she goes, are you Catholic? I go, yeah. She goes, well, in an emergency, you could give last rites. And I was like, well, I was an altar boy. You know, I never thought I'd get promoted that fast. You know, I was really very, you know, like, so I ran back. We both knelt down. We said it in Our Father. I believe a glory be to the Father.
Everything was really surreal. It was, I wouldn't say it was slow motion, but it was just, you were seeing things with your eyes that your mind just couldn't comprehend for the moment. You know, we were stopping at that point, and just anybody we passed, there was another firefighter, we would just ask them, did you hear anything about Ladder 12? Do you know, did you see where they were? Did you see them? Did, you know, anybody from our battalion, you know, we were just asking for them, and they said, no, but the chaplain is in the church. And then they said he's dead, and you know, I immediately knew it was Michael Judge. All of a sudden, it was just very dark. There was this dust in the air, and papers were flying everywhere. There was no color anywhere. It was just trees were covered, cars were covered, buildings were covered. Nothing had color to it. And when we opened the doors to the church, it was like you opened into a world of color. What light was coming through was filtering through stained glass windows, and the church just, for that moment, was so pure looking. You could see Michael Judge's body up on the altar. We just knelt down, and everybody had tears coming down, and said whatever quick prayer we could, and again stood up, knowing that we just had to keep going. We made our way out of the church, and we traced our steps, picking up our tools, and continued on our way.
God is present, loving, smiling, having received our loved ones. They are in His presence, illumined by His smile and warmed by His love. His kingdom is enriched this day, so enriched by so many beautiful souls. So much beauty.
You got two different pictures of Michael. This is
from the church. And I still have this clipping of his death. They brought him back to the church. Somebody brought this for me, and I wasn't part with it. When I was in Bronx Lebanon Hospital at that time, I had this ivory in my hand, you know, and I walk up to the front desk. I said, I want to see the nurse. I want this ivory to remove right now, and I have to leave here, no matter what. I said, I gotta go right now. You know, somebody close to me has just passed. I put on sneakers and I was shaved. I had on a tuxedo, and it was just something, you know, that I myself was surprised at how I came on. Got off the train at 7th Avenue, coming up Penn Station. They had a police barrier, you know, and everybody said, well, where are you going? I'm going to Michael's funeral. Well, you can't go to Michael's funeral. Why? Where's the invitation? Invitation. I don't have an invitation. So I pushed my way, mangled my way all the way up 31st Street. I saw Father Brian Carroll, and he called out to him. And then he came over and he told the officer, let him through, you know. And then he escorted me into the church. Water that came to my eyes. People came, they came for Michael. And all these people I met, even the mayor, the president, and his family, and other officials.
All of us who were privileged to know him feel a special loss, but we should lift his life up today as an example of what has to prevail in this conflict. We cannot let the 21st century world degenerate into killing over religious and racial and political differences. We have to, more of us got to be like Father Mike than the people that killed him.
My husband and I first heard of Father Mike during the White House years. We kept hearing about this charismatic Franciscan who ministered to the homeless, to AIDS victims, to immigrants, with perhaps a special touch for Irish immigrants, and who loved his firefighters. So we invited him to the White House. What a beacon of light. He lit up the White House as he lit up every place he ever found himself.
Michael came into my life. It's like St. Anthony. And I figured this is Michael here, and that's St. Anthony, and this is me. And I feel he always carrying me up until this day, right at this hour. I feel that is Michael, and that is me.
Let me tell you, he says, when you're walking down the street and you're wearing your habit, you know, he says, just look everybody in the eye and say hi.
I said, well, he's a Franciscan friar. And one of the women looked at me and she said, oh, what a waste. What a waste. This guy is so beautiful. And then she said, you know, I've never known a man of the cloth, but now I do, and I feel so good.
He would try to get us all to sing. He was terrible, we were worse, but he would always try.
I know I raised a lot of people's eyebrows. I told them I loved this man to bits.
He always have a smile on his face.
I really would have loved to have known him in life.
Over the period I've had AIDS, I've been in St. Vincent's Hospital at least a dozen times where Michael had come to anoint me. And those are important times. And certainly something I now will miss, knowing I will die without his physical being there.
The miracles that man wrought of bringing people into a good life, into sobriety, astounding the amount of people that he brought in.
I used to be surprised when, for instance, an envelope arrived from Michael, and among the notes in the envelopes might be, for instance, a recipe for Irish soda bread. In fact, I think he actually probably, over the years, he sent it to me about 3 times.
So I was walking across the street. Wee, wee, wee. I said, well, what I did? You know, I said, oh my, why is the cop stopping me for? Look, I told you you never know where I'll be. I said, oh, Father Michael, how could you do this to me?
Michael would always say, have a cup of tea and sing a song, and we could find some peace and understanding.
His parting gift to us was his dedication and his compassion and his heroism to stay with us right to the end.
God never let Michael Judge think he was special. He left him with all his struggles and his problems and his depressions and his doubts and fears. And so Michael never knew he was the saint. Michael thought he was one of the worst sinners.
He wouldn't want people to be burning candles in front of his statue. He would want them to be carrying that light within them. Be the best parent you can be and do it with all your power. Be the best lover you can be. Be the best spouse you can be. Be the best kid you can be. Be the best mayor you can be. Be the best cardinal you can be. Be about the people you love. Put your own needs second. That's what Michael would say.